Let me ask you something. What would you do if, on your anniversary, your husband's ex walked up and smashed a cake right in your pregnant face? Would you cry? Would you fight back? Or would you discover a strength you never knew you had? This story isn't just drama. It's a mirror of survival, dignity, and love. Stay with me, because trust me, you won't believe his response. And hey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that hit straight to the heart. The ballroom shimmered under golden chandeliers, the kind that made diamonds sparkle brighter and whispers sharper. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration, the kind of evening that cemented power and love under the eyes of society's elite. It was the 10th wedding anniversary of Nicholas Grant, one of New York's most talked-about billionaires, and his young wife, Emily. The press had been invited. Socialites filled every table, and the grand-tiered cake stood proudly at the center like a sugary crown. Emily stood quietly beside her husband, her hand resting protectively over her small baby bump. At only 6 months pregnant, she radiated a soft glow that no designer dress could replicate. She wasn't dressed in couture like the women who floated across the room in sequins and feathers. Instead, she wore a simple cream gown with delicate lace sleeves. It wasn't the kind of dress that screamed wealth, but it spoke of grace, sincerity, and a heart that still believed in love. For her, tonight wasn't about the cameras or the glittering glasses of champagne. It was about celebrating survival. She had endured long years of being whispered about, doubted, and underestimated. Tonight, she wanted to believe the world could finally see her as Nicholas's true partner, not just his modest wife. But not everyone shared that dream. Across the room, a woman in a blood-red gown with sharp shoulders and sharper eyes stalked toward the stage. Her name was Veronica Steele, the ex who had once thought Nicholas Grant was hers forever. Once upon a time, she had been his arm candy at these very galas. She knew the power of walking into a room, the way people gasped when she laughed too loud, the way cameras tilted toward her. But tonight, she wasn't here as a guest. She wasn't invited. She was here to reclaim the attention she had lost, to remind Nicholas that she was unforgettable. The music swelled, violins filling the air as Nicholas took Emily's hand and led her toward the cake. Photographers crowded forward, flashes like lightning in the golden hall. Nicholas leaned toward his wife, whispering something only she could hear, and for a brief moment Emily's nervous smile softened. Maybe, just maybe, the night would end beautifully. Then it happened. In a blur of crimson silk and fury, Veronica mounted the stage. Gasps rippled through the crowd as her jeweled heels clattered against the marble. She didn't hesitate. She didn't stutter. With the precision of a woman fueled by rage and humiliation, she seized the silver cake knife, carved into the bottom tier, and scooped a massive chunk of vanilla cream and frosting. Before anyone could stop her, she turned and smash! The cake landed squarely across Emily's face. The room froze. The violins screeched to silence. Champagne glasses stopped midair. Emily staggered back, her breath caught, her lace gown smeared with buttercream and strawberry filling. She touched her cheek, trembling as the sweetness dripped onto her bump, staining the delicate fabric. A horrified murmur swept across the ballroom, rising like a wave. Guests leaned forward, eyes wide, phones raised to capture the scandal that would dominate tabloids by morning. Veronica's laughter sliced through the silence like glass. "This," she spat, "is what you get when you replace me with a plain little nobody. You think you can wear lace and carry his child and pretend you belong here? You're nothing, Emily. Nothing." Tears welled in Emily's eyes, but she didn't speak. Her silence only fueled Veronica's smirk. The ex turned toward Nicholas, expecting his approval, his smoldering defense of her place in his world. After all, hadn't they once been unstoppable together? Didn't he still think of her when he looked at Emily's modest dresses and quiet eyes? But Nicholas didn't move. Every guest in that glittering ballroom waited. Would the billionaire laugh it off, embarrassed by his wife's simplicity? Would he excuse Veronica's cruelty as a jealous outburst? Would he stand by, silent, and let his pregnant wife crumble under public humiliation? The tension became unbearable, a storm pressing against the marble walls. Emily lowered her eyes, humiliated beyond words, and a cruel thought slashed through her heart. Maybe he won't protect me. Maybe I was a fool to believe he ever would. And then Nicholas spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the ballroom like thunder. "Veronica," he said slowly, his gaze like steel, "you just made the biggest mistake of your life." The crowd gasped. Veronica blinked, caught off guard. She opened her mouth to laugh again, but Nicholas wasn't finished. He stepped forward, pulling Emily gently against his chest, wiping the cake from her cheek with the sleeve of his $1,000 tuxedo without hesitation. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing the image of a billionaire choosing his pregnant wife over the spectacle of his glamorous ex. "You think Emily doesn't belong here?" Nicholas's voice grew sharper, each word striking like a blade. "She's the only one who belongs here. She is my wife, the mother of my child, and the only person who has ever loved me for more than the number in my bank account." Gasps turned to whispers. Guests leaned in closer. Veronica's smirk faltered. For the first time that evening, her eyes darted nervously, scanning the room that had once adored her but now stared with disgust. Nicholas's arm tightened protectively around Emily. "You, Veronica," he said coldly, "are nothing but a bitter memory, and you don't get to touch her. Not now. Not ever again." The silence that followed was heavier than any orchestra. Then, slowly, applause began, hesitant at first, then stronger, until the ballroom echoed with thunderous clapping. Guests rose to their feet. Phones flashed like fireworks, capturing the billionaire's words, the pregnant wife's tear-streaked face, and the humiliated ex retreating in disgrace. But even as Veronica turned on her heel, her eyes burning with vengeance, Emily knew this wasn't the end. The ex had made her first move, but wars like this never ended with cake. Something darker, something more dangerous, was waiting just beyond the chandeliers. And in that moment, as the crowd cheered, Emily felt a chill. The real battle had only just begun. The applause that filled the ballroom still echoed in Emily Grant's ears long after the lights dimmed and the last flashbulb faded. Her hands trembled as she clutched her husband's arm, the sticky traces of frosting still clinging to her gown. For a brief moment she felt protected, even cherished. Yet behind her tired smile, a storm of memories churned. Memories that told the true story of how she had come to this glittering, dangerous stage. Emily wasn't born into this world of chandeliers and marble staircases. Her story began far away, in a quiet town tucked between cornfields and narrow roads where everyone knew each other's names. She was the daughter of a mechanic and a schoolteacher, people who believed in hard work and quiet dignity rather than flashy wealth. From a young age, Emily learned to value kindness over appearances. Her clothes were hand-me-downs, her shoes worn at the edges, but her smile lit up every room she entered. Her mother used to tell her, "Sweetheart, real beauty has nothing to do with what you wear. It's how you carry yourself when the world wants to see you fall." Those words clung to Emily like a shield, though she never realized how much she would need them. She was an excellent student, the kind who stayed up late finishing essays while her friends went to parties. She dreamed of becoming a nurse, of helping people heal, of living a life built on service instead of greed. But money was scarce, and college felt like an impossible mountain. She took shifts at a diner, serving coffee to truck drivers and cleaning tables while studying late into the night. Every tip she collected went into a jar marked dreams, and though it filled slowly, she never lost hope. It was in that very diner that fate changed everything. Nicholas Grant wasn't supposed to be there. The billionaire heir to a sprawling real estate empire, he had been on his way to a board meeting when his car broke down on the interstate. Hungry and impatient, he had stepped into the small-town diner, expecting nothing more than a hot meal and a quiet corner. What he didn't expect was Emily. She appeared at his table with a tired smile, her apron stained with coffee, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. "Hi there," she said softly. "What can I get for you?" To Nicholas, used to people bending over backward to impress him, there was something disarming in her simple sincerity. She didn't care about his watch, his tailored suit, or his last name. She looked at him as though he was just another man who needed a plate of food. For weeks afterward, he found reasons to return to that diner. At first, he claimed he liked the pie. But truthfully, it was Emily's laugh, her gentle way of listening, and the rare honesty in her eyes that pulled him back again and again. By the time he confessed who he really was, she didn't flinch. She didn't swoon at the mention of his billions. She simply shrugged and said, Money can't fix loneliness, Nicholas. I hope you know that. He had fallen for her then, deeply, desperately, in a way he hadn't believed possible. And against the advice of his advisors, his friends, and even his own family, he married her. At first, their marriage was a fairy tale. They lived in a penthouse overlooking the city skyline, but Emily still preferred cooking simple meals in the kitchen over dining at Michelin-starred restaurants. She still called her parents every Sunday, still wore her favorite $30 sweater around the house. Nicholas adored her humility, telling anyone who asked that Emily kept him grounded. But the world of wealth is cruel to outsiders. The tabloids whispered, "Why her? She's too plain. She doesn't fit." Society wives sneered at her thrift store dresses. Nicholas's ex-lovers, glamorous women with diamond earrings and sharper tongues, laughed at her behind champagne flutes. And yet, through it all, Emily held her head high. She told herself she didn't need their approval. She told herself that as long as Nicholas stood by her, she could endure. Then came the pregnancy. For Emily, discovering she was carrying Nicholas's child was the purest joy she had ever known. She imagined tiny footsteps echoing in their home, imagined Nicholas holding their baby with the same tenderness he once showed her. But the pregnancy also brought vulnerability. Morning sickness left her weak, her once thin frame softening under the weight of new life. And with that vulnerability came sharper whispers from the outside world. She looks tired. He deserves someone glamorous, not a frumpy little wife. Veronica Steele, Nicholas's infamous ex, was the loudest whisper of them all. She made sure Emily felt her presence at every gala, every charity event, always arriving in gowns that screamed for attention, always tossing Emily a look that said, "You'll never measure up." And though Emily told herself she didn't care, deep inside she feared Veronica might be right. The anniversary gala was supposed to silence those doubts. It was supposed to be the night Emily finally felt like she belonged. Instead, she ended up with cake dripping from her cheeks, humiliated before the entire city. Back in the quiet of their limousine, Emily touched her swollen belly and whispered, "I'm sorry, little one. I didn't mean to embarrass you." Nicholas reached for her hand, his voice tender. "Don't you dare apologize. You are everything, Emily. Don't ever forget that." But as the city lights flashed outside the window, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Veronica wasn't finished. She had struck once, but a woman like her didn't walk away easily. Emily knew storms. She had grown up watching tornadoes rip across her town, sudden and merciless. And tonight, in the shadows of her heart, she felt the same warning. The sky was darkening again. And if the first strike was cake, what would the second strike be? The night of Nicholas and Emily Grant's anniversary gala had been painted in gold from the very beginning. Every detail spoke of wealth, status, and the kind of perfection money buys when it wants the world to bow in admiration. The Crystal Palace Hotel had been chosen months in advance, its grand ballroom transformed into a glittering stage that screamed luxury. At the center of the ceiling hung a chandelier so massive it seemed to hold stars within its crystals. Its golden glow bathed the marble floors, polished so perfectly that each guest could see their reflection in them. Tables draped in ivory silk lined the hall, adorned with arrangements of white roses and orchids imported from Singapore, their petals glowing under candlelight. Waiters in crisp uniforms glided across the room, carrying trays of champagne flutes that sparkled with Dom Perignon. It was the kind of evening that made ordinary people feel small, but to the elite gathered here, it was merely another night of showing off their power. Nicholas, as the host, carried himself with the practiced ease of a man who knew the room belonged to him. His tuxedo was flawless, his watch understated yet worth more than most people's homes. Around him, investors and politicians laughed loudly, desperate to be seen close to his orbit. Yet every time he looked at Emily, there was a flicker of softness, a reminder that for all his billions, she was the reason this night truly mattered. Emily, meanwhile, moved shyly through the crowd, her hand brushing the swell of her belly as if to shield her child from the weight of so many judging eyes. She wore the cream gown she had chosen herself. Not from a designer showroom, but from a small boutique where the seamstress had treated her with kindness rather than condescension. The gown clung gently to her growing figure, lace tracing her arms like whispers of innocence. Against the diamonds and feathers flashing all around her, she looked fragile, almost out of place, yet radiated a quiet dignity no money could buy. But not everyone appreciated that quiet dignity. The whispers began early. "Is that really the wife of Nicholas Grant?" one woman murmured behind her jeweled mask. "She looks like she belongs in a church choir, not in this ballroom." "I heard she used to wait tables." Imagine that. Serving food 1 year, and now pretending she belongs among us. Emily heard them, though she tried to keep her smile steady. She had prepared herself for this. She knew the gala wasn't just a celebration. It was a battlefield. The orchestra struck up a waltz, filling the air with music that seemed too delicate for the sharp edges of envy cutting through the room. Guests swirled across the floor, dresses shimmering, shoes gliding. Emily sat quietly at the edge, her hand resting protectively over her belly, until Nicholas offered his hand. "Dance with me," he whispered. She hesitated. "With everyone watching?" "Let them watch," he said firmly. So she rose, and for a few precious minutes the world faded. Nicholas's hand at her back, the music wrapping around them, the baby between them, it felt like home, like safety. Cameras flashed, but for once Emily didn't care. She belonged in his arms. And for those minutes, she allowed herself to believe it. But storms were already forming at the edge of the ballroom. Among the crowd stood Veronica Steele, her crimson gown a deliberate act of war. She hadn't been invited, but her connections had always opened doors. People noticed her immediately. Some whispered in admiration, others in pity, but most in anticipation. Everyone knew Veronica was the ex who had once nearly become Mrs. Grant, and her presence tonight promised scandal. As Emily swayed with Nicholas, Veronica's eyes narrowed. Every laugh Emily shared with her husband was a dagger to Veronica's pride. She gripped her glass tighter, the diamonds at her wrist glittering under the lights. For her, this wasn't just an anniversary. It was a stage, and she intended to steal it. The evening unfolded with speeches, toasts, and endless rounds of laughter that seemed hollow to Emily's ears. The mayor congratulated Nicholas on his success. A senator hinted at future deals, and the press snapped photos of every gesture. Emily smiled when required, nodded politely at strangers, but inside she longed for the simplicity of her old life. Quiet nights, warm kitchens, laughter without the weight of judgment. The cake was unveiled just before midnight. A towering masterpiece of sugar and art, layered with gold leaf and fresh berries, it stood as the centerpiece of the celebration. Guests gathered, phones ready. As Nicholas and Emily approached hand in hand, the orchestra softened, the room hushed, and for one fragile second, Emily thought she might finally be safe. But the hush broke. The storm arrived. Veronica's heels clicked sharply against the marble as she strode forward, her smile dazzling and cruel. The crowd parted, whispers rising like smoke. She mounted the stage without hesitation, her movements confident, her gown trailing like fire. No one dared stop her. Emily's heart sank. She knew what was coming. The cake knife gleamed under the chandelier as Veronica seized it. And then, in front of hundreds of eyes, she scooped a handful of frosting and smashed it across Emily's face. The sound was soft, a wet slap, but the effect was shattering. Gasps, screams, and the snap of cameras filled the air. Emily staggered, tears mixing with frosting, her gown ruined, her dignity stripped bare under the cruel laughter of her husband's ex. Nicholas's reaction would stun the world, but in that frozen moment, Emily's soul whispered one truth. If she survived this night, she would never be the same woman again. Veronica Steele was not the kind of woman who faded into the background. She was the kind of woman who lit up a room, even when no one invited her in. From the moment she stepped into the Crystal Palace ballroom in her crimson gown, heads turned. She knew they would. She had built her entire life around making sure people noticed her and envied her. Once, years ago, she had been the star at Nicholas Grant's side. She was younger then, sharper, her beauty a weapon she wielded without hesitation. She had met Nicholas at an international art gala in Paris, where she had swept into the hall draped in a Versace gown, her laughter echoing like music. Nicholas, still climbing the empire his father had left behind, had been drawn to her fire. For 2 years, they were the golden couple of New York society. Headlines called her the Queen of Glamour and the woman who tamed the city's most eligible billionaire. But Veronica had never been tame. The relationship collapsed under the weight of her hunger. She wanted more than Nicholas's arm and his money. She wanted his empire. When Nicholas hesitated to merge his heart with his business, Veronica grew restless. She toyed with other powerful men, flirted openly, and whispered to the press. Eventually, the cracks became too wide, and Nicholas ended it. For Veronica, it was the ultimate humiliation. One minute she was sipping champagne beside the man who ruled New York's skyline, and the next she was nothing but a headline. Grant dumps Veronica Steele. Billionaire moves on. She never forgave him, and then came Emily. When Veronica first saw Nicholas's new wife in the tabloids, she laughed so hard champagne spilled across her silk sheets. A plain little waitress from nowhere, a girl with second-hand dresses and a soft smile. It was laughable. But as the months passed, that laughter soured. Nicholas didn't just marry Emily. He seemed devoted to her in a way he had never been to Veronica. It was unbearable. Veronica's pride burned every time she saw Emily's modest face in society pages. She told herself Nicholas had chosen her because he wanted something safe, something boring. But deep inside, she feared the truth. Emily had something Veronica never could. A kind of quiet strength, a purity, a love that didn't come with conditions. And now, with Emily pregnant, the humiliation grew sharper. Veronica saw the baby as the final nail in the coffin of her relevance. Once the child was born, Emily's place would be cemented forever. Nicholas's empire would belong not just to his wife, but to their heir. For Veronica, it wasn't just jealousy, it was extinction. So she planned her attack. The anniversary gala was her chance. She knew the cameras would be there, that the city's most powerful would be watching. If she could humiliate Emily in public, if she could reduce her to nothing more than a tearful, frosting-smeared spectacle, then maybe she could remind Nicholas who the real queen of this world was. She didn't expect Nicholas to defend Emily so fiercely. That cut deeper than any rejection. In her mind, Nicholas should have hesitated. He should have remembered the fire they once had. Instead, he had thrown her away again, this time in front of everyone. But Veronica was not the kind of woman who retreated quietly. As she stormed out of the ballroom, the sound of applause ringing behind her like a slap, she promised herself this wasn't the end. Emily might have survived the cake, but Veronica had weapons far sharper than buttercream. She knew secrets about Nicholas's business, about the shady deals his board would do anything to bury. And she knew how to wield charm like a dagger, slipping into circles where whispers could ruin reputations overnight. Back in her penthouse, Veronica poured herself a glass of red wine and stood before the mirror. She wiped off her lipstick, leaving a smear across her cheek like war paint. "You think you've won, Emily?" she whispered to her reflection. "You have no idea what game you're playing." Because Veronica didn't just want Nicholas back. She wanted to destroy Emily piece by piece, her reputation, her confidence, her marriage. And she had already decided on her next move. The very next morning, society pages exploded with headlines. Scandal at the Grant Gala, pregnant wife humiliated by ex. Is Emily Grant strong enough for this world? Veronica Steele returns and steals the spotlight. Emily was everywhere, her tear-stained face splashed across magazines, her humiliation dissected by morning talk shows. And Veronica smiled. She had planted the seed of doubt, not just in society's mind, but perhaps in Nicholas's as well. But she wasn't done. Veronica had made a call before dawn. To someone powerful, someone dangerous, someone who had been waiting for the chance to hurt Nicholas Grant where it truly mattered. She didn't need to swing the sword herself, not when she could hand it to a willing executioner. The ex-lover turned enemy was ready to play her next card. And Emily, still fragile from her public humiliation, had no idea that the real war had just begun. The gala was supposed to end with champagne toasts and photographs of a happy couple smiling under chandeliers. Instead, the image the world saw was Emily Grant's tear-streaked face smeared with frosting. By morning, every magazine, every website, every television station replayed the scene in slow motion. Clips of Veronica Steele smashing cake into Emily's face went viral. Some headlines were cruel. From waitress to wreck, billionaire's wife crumbles in public. Nicholas Grant's wife humiliated. Is she strong enough for high society? Others were more vicious. Veronica Steele back and unstoppable. Emily sat in the back of the limousine, scrolling through her phone with trembling hands, each headline cutting deeper than the last. The baby inside her stirred, and she pressed a hand to her belly. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Nicholas sat beside her, jaw clenched, fingers tightening around hers. "Ignore them," he said firmly. "None of it matters." But it did matter. To Emily, it mattered more than anything. For years she had endured whispers that she didn't belong, that she was too plain, too simple, too weak for Nicholas Grant's world. Now, those whispers had become shouts. And no matter what Nicholas said, she knew society would not forget. The next day, the scandal deepened. Veronica appeared on a morning talk show, her crimson gown replaced with a demure cream suit, her hair swept into a polished chignon. She smiled sweetly for the cameras, playing the victim. "I didn't mean to hurt Emily," she cooed, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "It was an emotional night. Nicholas and I, we have history. You don't just erase that. I only wanted to remind him of who we used to be." The host leaned in. "But Veronica, smashing cake into a pregnant woman's face? That seems cruel." Veronica laughed, soft and dismissive. "Cruel? No. Impulsive, maybe. But honestly, do you think Emily is really suited for this world? I mean, look at her. She looks lost, doesn't she? The pressure of society, the cameras, the expectations, it's too much for her. I actually feel sorry for her." The audience chuckled. The host smiled awkwardly, and across the city, Emily watched the broadcast with tears streaming down her face. She felt stripped bare, powerless, her dignity shredded on national television. And then came the photographs. Someone, Emily would later learn it was Veronica's hired paparazzi, had followed her the morning after the gala. They captured her leaving the doctor's office in a plain sweater, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. The images flooded tabloids with captions like, "Pregnant and weak, Emily Grant breaks down." Emily wanted to disappear. She refused to leave the penthouse, refused to answer calls from friends. Even her parents called, their voices trembling with worry. But Emily couldn't bring herself to answer. She felt ashamed, as though she had failed not only herself but the baby she carried. Nicholas, however, burned with fury. "She crossed the line," he growled, slamming the morning paper onto the marble counter. "First at the gala, now this circus on television. She thinks she can drag you through the mud and walk away. Not this time." But before Nicholas could act, another betrayal struck. That evening, the board of Grant Enterprises gathered for an emergency meeting. Several directors, pressured by whispers Veronica had planted, expressed concern about Emily's image. They argued that Nicholas's marriage and his wife's humiliation was tarnishing the company's reputation. "She's not equipped to be the face of this empire," one director sneered. "Investors are nervous. If your wife continues to be a liability, Nicholas will be forced to reconsider leadership." Emily overheard it all from the hallway, her heart breaking. For the first time, she realized Veronica wasn't just trying to humiliate her. She was trying to dismantle her marriage, her husband's empire, their entire future. That night, as Nicholas held her close, Emily whispered through her tears, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe you'd be better off without me." Nicholas pulled back, his eyes blazing. "Don't you ever say that. You are my wife. You are the mother of my child. You belong more than anyone in this world. And I swear to you, Emily, I will not let Veronica win." But the damage had already been done. The city buzzed with gossip, investors whispered about scandals, and the press painted Emily as fragile, weak, unworthy. Veronica had won the first battle, and she knew it. In her penthouse, Veronica poured champagne into a crystal flute, watching the coverage with satisfaction. She leaned back against velvet cushions, her smile sharp. "Let them all see," she whispered. "Emily Grant isn't strong enough, and soon Nicholas will see it too." But what Veronica didn't know, what no one knew, was that Emily's pain was beginning to transform. Beneath the humiliation, beneath the tears, something inside her stirred. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was resolve. Emily touched her belly, whispering to her unborn child, "I won't let them destroy us. I don't know how, but I'll fight back. For you." And as the city cheered Veronica's cruel performance, Emily Grant quietly began to rise. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge doesn't come from fury, it comes from a woman no one believed could fight at all. For days after the gala scandal, Emily hardly left her bedroom. The penthouse, once a place of warmth, now felt like a glass cage. The city's skyline glittered outside the windows, but she couldn't bear to look at it. Every light felt like a reminder of the eyes watching her, judging her, laughing at her humiliation. She turned off her phone. The endless stream of messages, some sympathetic, most cruel, became unbearable. Strangers called her weak, tabloids mocked her dress, talk shows debated whether she was fit to be a billionaire's wife. Even women she once considered friends sent carefully worded texts. "Stay strong, Emily. These things happen." She knew what they meant. They pitied her. Her body ached. The stress of the scandal weighed on her pregnancy, each wave of nausea sharper, each night longer. She lay awake in the dark, her hand pressed against her belly, whispering apologies to the child growing inside her. "I should have been stronger," she murmured. "I should have protected us." Nicholas tried. Every morning he came to her side, begging her to eat, to come downstairs, to walk outside. He told her she was beautiful, that she was strong, that none of this mattered. But she saw the tension in his eyes, the way his jaw tightened when his phone buzzed with calls from the board, from investors, from journalists hungry for another headline. She knew she wasn't just his wife anymore. She had become his liability. The worst moment came one gray afternoon, when she finally gathered courage to turn on the television. On the screen was Veronica Steele, once again seated elegantly in a studio, her voice soft, her eyes shimmering with fake tears. "I didn't mean to hurt Emily," Veronica said, dabbing her cheek with a tissue. "But honestly, I worry for her. She seems so fragile, and now that she's pregnant, maybe it's too much. Maybe Nicholas deserves someone who can handle this life." The audience nodded sympathetically, and the host leaned closer. "Are you saying Nicholas made a mistake marrying her?" Veronica's lips curved into a pitying smile. "I wouldn't say that, but sometimes love blinds us, and when the blindfold comes off, it's too late." Emily turned off the television, bile rising in her throat. She ran to the bathroom, clutching the sink as tears streamed down her face. She stared at her reflection. The swollen eyes, the pale skin, the gown from the gala still crumpled on the floor where she had thrown it days ago, and she barely recognized herself. "This is what she wants," she whispered to the mirror. "She wants me broken." Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, sobbing. That night, Nicholas found her curled on the bathroom tiles, shaking. He lifted her gently into his arms, holding her against his chest. "Don't let her win, Emily," he begged. "Don't let her steal your light." But Emily couldn't answer. She felt hollow, emptied of strength. Her spirit cracked under the weight of shame. The days blurred. She stopped answering her parents' calls, stopped opening the curtains, stopped caring about the outside world. She drifted like a shadow through the penthouse, each room echoing with her silence. Even the nursery, once a place of joy with its painted stars and soft blankets, now filled her with dread. How could she raise a child in a world that hated her? One evening, she overheard Nicholas on the phone in his office. His voice was low, sharp. "If the board thinks for 1 second that I'll abandon my wife, they're wrong. Emily is my family. If they can't accept her, they can find another CEO." Emily froze in the hallway. His loyalty moved her, but it also cut deep. She didn't want him to lose everything because of her. For the first time, a dark thought crept into her mind. Maybe leaving would protect him. But where could she go? She had no world outside of Nicholas anymore. Her old life, the diner, the town, her dreams of becoming a nurse, they felt like distant memories, lost in another universe. She was trapped between who she had been and who she was supposed to be, and she didn't belong to either. The breaking point came at a charity luncheon 2 weeks later. Nicholas convinced her to attend, promising it would be small, supportive. Reluctantly, Emily dressed in a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, her heart pounding. But the moment she walked in, the whispers began. "That's her. Poor thing. She looks awful. Imagine being her child, always a scandal hanging over you." Emily's hands shook so badly she spilled her water. Laughter erupted at the next table. Veronica wasn't even there, but her shadow poisoned the air. Emily fled the hall, tears streaming down her face, clutching her belly as though shielding her baby from the cruelty. Back in the limousine, she buried her face in her hands. "I can't do this, Nicholas," she cried. "I can't live like this. I'm drowning, and I'm dragging you down with me." Nicholas held her shoulders, his voice fierce. "Listen to me. You are not weak. You are not a mistake. You are everything. But if you give up now, Emily, then Veronica wins. And I won't let her. Do you hear me? I won't let her. But Emily wasn't sure she could fight anymore. Her strength had been ground into dust, her spirit hollowed out by endless humiliation. She felt like a ghost in her own life, a woman who had lost her place in the world. That night, lying awake in the dark, she whispered to her unborn child, "Maybe this is who I am. Maybe I'm not strong enough. Maybe the world was right about me all along." But as she closed her eyes, exhausted and broken, a new thought sparked faintly in her mind, a flicker she couldn't ignore. What if Veronica was wrong? What if, buried under all the pain, there was a version of Emily stronger than anyone imagined? And what if that version was about to wake up? The night Emily whispered that she might not be strong enough was the night everything changed. For weeks, she had drowned in humiliation, but sometimes a soul has to break completely before it can discover its true strength. It began with a letter. One morning, while Nicholas was at the office, Emily wandered into the nursery. The painted stars still shone faintly in the soft light. She sat in the rocking chair, cradling her belly, when the housekeeper entered with the day's mail. Among the glossy magazines mocking her face and the thick envelopes of invitations she dared not open was a small package. No return address. Inside, wrapped in brown paper, was a photograph. An old one. It showed her parents standing proudly in front of their modest home, her father's arm around her mother, her younger self smiling between them. Beneath it was a handwritten note. "Emily, never forget where you come from. Strength runs in your blood. They can laugh at you, but they cannot erase you. A friend." She stared at the photo for a long time, tears filling her eyes. She didn't know who had sent it, maybe her parents, maybe someone else, but the words struck her deeply. She wasn't weak. She wasn't just Nicholas's wife or society's target. She was Emily, daughter of a mechanic and a teacher, raised to fight storms with dignity. For the first time in weeks, she stood tall. That evening, she called Priya, her closest friend from nursing school days. They hadn't spoken much since Emily's marriage had pulled her into a world too sharp for old friendships, but Priya answered on the first ring. "Emily?" Her voice broke. "I've been so worried. Are you okay?" "No," Emily admitted, "but I want to be, and I need help." The words felt like a lifeline. Priya listened, encouraged, and reminded Emily of who she used to be. The girl who stayed up all night studying, who wiped tables with a tired smile, who dreamed of helping others. "That girl is still in you," Priya said firmly, "and she's stronger than all of them." The conversation lit something inside Emily. For the first time, she felt the faint spark of defiance. The next step came from Nicholas himself. That night, he revealed something he had been holding back. "Emily," he said quietly, "you don't know this, but before my father died, he left a series of letters. Not business letters, personal ones. I've never shown them to anyone, but I think you should read them." She hesitated, but Nicholas placed a stack of envelopes in her hands. Inside were words she hadn't expected. Letters from a man she had never met, addressed not to her, but to the son he knew would someday struggle with power. "Wealth means nothing if you can't protect the people you love," one letter read. "Remember, real strength comes from humility and loyalty. Marry a woman who grounds you, not one who dazzles you. And when the world mocks her, stand taller beside her." Emily's hands shook. Nicholas's father had seen her before she had even arrived. He had written her into Nicholas's destiny without knowing her name. She wasn't an accident. She wasn't a mistake. She was meant to be here. That realization changed everything. Emily began to reclaim herself. She started with small steps, opening the curtains, walking through the garden, eating meals again. Then she did something bolder. She called a stylist. Not one of the flashy society stylists who draped women in jewels, but a woman recommended by Priya, someone who believed in dressing the soul, not the body. When Emily met her, she explained softly, "I don't want to look rich. I want to look like me, but stronger." The stylist smiled. "Then let's show them the real Emily." Piece by piece, Emily transformed. Her gowns became simpler but sharper, tailored to highlight her presence rather than hide it. She cut her hair into a style that framed her face with quiet power. She wore jewelry Nicholas's mother had left behind, pieces with history, not just price tags. and when she looked in the mirror for the first time, she saw not a victim, but a woman reborn. Nicholas noticed too. One evening, as she walked into the dining room in a deep emerald dress, her belly rounded, her chin lifted, his breath caught. "Emily," he whispered, "you've never looked more powerful." She smiled faintly. "I'm not just your wife anymore, Nicholas. I'm my own woman, and I'm ready to fight." The fight came sooner than expected. Veronica, sensing her control slipping, leaked a false story to the press that Nicholas had been secretly meeting her again, rekindling their romance behind Emily's back. The tabloids exploded. Grant torn between two women splashed across headlines. Television hosts debated whether Emily would leave him, whether Veronica would take her place. But this time, Emily didn't hide. When the reporters swarmed outside the penthouse, she stepped out herself. Nicholas at her side. Cameras flashed, questions flew. Emily held her head high and said clearly, "I know what Veronica is trying to do. She thinks lies will break me. But let me be very clear, I am Nicholas Grant's wife, the mother of his child, and I am not going anywhere." The footage aired that night, and for the first time, the tide began to turn. Social media lit up with praise. Emily finally fights back. The quiet wife roars. But Veronica wasn't finished. That same night, she called her secret ally, the one she had been feeding with information about Nicholas's company. "It's time," she said coldly. "If we can't break Emily, then we'll break Nicholas, and when his empire falls, she'll fall with him." Emily, unaware of the storm gathering, lay in bed with Nicholas, her hand resting on her belly. She whispered to the baby, "We're stronger now. They don't know what's coming." But outside their window, under the glittering skyline, enemies sharpened their knives. And the next move would be the deadliest one yet. The storm Veronica unleashed threatened to tear everything apart. Her false rumors, her staged interviews, her shadowy allies. It all seemed designed to crush Emily and Nicholas once and for all. But what Veronica didn't realize was that Emily Grant had changed. She was no longer the quiet, trembling woman humiliated at a gala. She was no longer the fragile figure hiding behind curtains. She had risen, and she was ready to fight, not with cruelty, but with truth. The opportunity came faster than anyone expected. The city buzzed with anticipation for the annual Crown Charity Gala, an event even grander than the anniversary where Emily had been humiliated weeks earlier. It was the night when billionaires, politicians, and celebrities gathered under one roof. Veronica planned to make it her final stage. She whispered to her allies that she would announce shocking proof of Nicholas's betrayal, painting herself as his true love and Emily as the unworthy obstacle. But Emily was one step ahead. In the days leading up to the gala, she worked quietly with Priya, Nicholas, and even a few members of the board who had grown tired of Veronica's manipulations. Together they gathered evidence, emails, recordings, financial documents, showing how Veronica had bribed paparazzi, leaked lies, and conspired with Nicholas's rivals to destabilize his company. Every scheme was traced back to her, every betrayal documented. Emily didn't just want to clear her name. She wanted to end Veronica's reign of cruelty once and for all. The night of the Crown Charity Gala arrived. The Crystal Palace ballroom gleamed brighter than before, chandeliers glittering, violins echoing across marble. Guests whispered as Emily entered, Nicholas by her side. She wore a gown of deep sapphire, her hair sleek, her posture unshakable. Her baby bump was visible now, but instead of hiding it, she wore it proudly, her hand resting on it as though to say, "This is my strength, not my weakness." The crowd buzzed. She looks different. She looks powerful. She's not the same woman from the anniversary. Veronica arrived moments later, dressed in gold sequins that screamed arrogance. Her smile was sharp, her eyes glittering with anticipation. She believed tonight would be hers. The evening unfolded with speeches and music, but the tension simmered beneath the surface. Everyone knew a confrontation was coming, and it came when Veronica seized the microphone during the silent auction, her voice slicing through the chatter. "Ladies and gentlemen," she purred, "we all know appearances can be deceiving. Tonight, I feel compelled to tell you the truth about Nicholas Grant and his so-called wife." Gasps rippled. Cameras turned. Veronica raised her chin, savoring the attention. "Nicholas and I share a bond that cannot be broken. He may parade Emily here, but everyone knows she is fragile, unfit for this world. And soon, You will all see that I am the one truly meant to stand at his side." The room buzzed with murmurs. Emily felt her heart pound, but she did not falter. She rose from her chair, her sapphire gown shimmering as she walked to the stage. The crowd parted for her, phones raised, eyes wide. Veronica's smirk faltered as Emily took the microphone from her hand. Emily's voice was calm, steady. "Veronica," she said softly, "for weeks you've tried to break me. You thought humiliation would destroy me. You thought lies would bury me, but you forgot one thing." She turned to the crowd, her eyes clear and fierce. "The truth always wins." She nodded to Nicholas, who signaled the projection screen behind them. Suddenly, the ballroom filled with images and recordings. The emails Veronica had sent to tabloids, the footage of her bribing photographers, the documents linking her to Nicholas's rivals. Gasps erupted as every dirty scheme was laid bare. "This," Emily continued, "is the woman who claims to care about Nicholas. But love doesn't look like sabotage. Love doesn't look like cruelty. Love doesn't look like smashing cake into a pregnant woman's face." The crowd erupted in murmurs of shock and disgust. Veronica's face blanched. She tried to grab the microphone back, but Emily stepped forward, her voice rising above the chaos. "I may not come from wealth. I may not sparkle with diamonds, but I know who I am. I am Emily Grant. I am Nicholas's wife. I am the mother of his child. And no one, not even you, Veronica, can take that away from me." For a moment, silence reigned, and then applause broke out. Hesitant at first, then stronger, until the ballroom thundered with it. Guests rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, chanting Emily's name. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing the image of the once shy woman now standing tall, victorious. Veronica stumbled back, her face twisted in rage. "This isn't over," she screamed. But security was already moving toward her. Within minutes she was escorted out of the ballroom, her golden gown trailing like tarnished glory. Emily stood tall on the stage, tears glistening in her eyes, but they were not tears of shame. They were tears of triumph. Nicholas joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, his voice carrying across the hall. "This," he declared, "is my wife, and she is the strongest woman I have ever known." The crowd roared. Later that night, as the gala wound down, guests approached Emily with genuine admiration. Some apologized for doubting her. Others praised her courage. For the first time since stepping into Nicholas's world, Emily felt truly seen. Not as an outsider, not as a liability, but as a woman who had earned her place. Back in the limousine, Nicholas kissed her hand. "You've silenced her forever," he whispered. Emily looked out at the city lights, her hand resting on her belly. "No," she said softly. "I didn't just silence her. I found myself, and this is only the beginning." The baby kicked gently as if in agreement, and Emily smiled. She knew storms would come again. Life always brought storms, but she was no longer afraid. She had survived humiliation, betrayal, and cruelty. She had risen, stronger than before. And now, she carried not only her child, but also a message for every woman watching her story. You are never too weak, too plain, or too small to rise. The world may try to break you, but only you can decide who you are. So that's how this story ends. But you, my wonderful friends, if you're still here, maybe something touched your heart. Remember what Marcus Aurelius said: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Healing begins there. If this resonated, like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep growing together.